Hello everyone! Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So for today's video, I'm gonna tackle about the neuroscience of learning. So when we say neuroscience of learning, it is a multidisciplinary field that explores how the brain processes and acquires new information, skills, and knowledge. It investigates the neural mechanisms and cognitive processes involved in learning, memory, and skill acquisition, aiming to understand the biological basis of learning and improve educational strategies and interventions. So here are the contents of my lesson for today. The first one is the organization and structures of the brain. The second one is the neurophysiology of learning. Third one is the brain development. Fourth one is the motivation and emotions. And the last one is the instructional applications. So our brain is the complex organ located in the head that serves as the central processing unit of the nervous system in humans and many animals. It is responsible for processing sensory information, controlling bodily functions, and facilitating various cognitive processes, including thinking, memory, and emotion. In other terms, brain is the intricate and highly organized biological structure within our skull that plays a fundamental role in coordinating and controlling an organism's functions, actions, thoughts, emotions, and bodily functions. It consists of specialized regions and networks of neurons, which is the nerve cells, that communicate through electrical and chemical signals, enabling the brain to process information, generate consciousness, and regulate essential physiological process. So, just like what I have said earlier, brain is the command center of our body. It is made up of billions of tiny cells called neurons that communicate with each other using electrical signals. Our brain is also responsible for who we are, how we think, want, and what we feel. So, the different parts of the brain have a specific jobs, allowing us to think, move, feel emotions, and take care of vital functions like heartbeat and breathing. The first part of our brain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is popularly known as the little brain. It is located behind and its bottom of the brain where the spinal cord meets the brain. It is made of two halves known as cerebellar hemispheres. The main function of the cerebellum is to maintain balance, posture, and tone of the body. It is called cerebellum because it's the Latin for little brain. It may be small, but it contains 70 billion neurons, which is 5 times as many neurons as the physically larger cerebral cortex. It is highly convoluted or resembling a cauliflower. The cerebellum has recently taken center stage in its importance for honing our most practiced talents, from playing the piano to hitting a home run. The cerebellum helps improve motor skills by detecting errors and improvements or the movements and making minute adjustments to the next movement. The next adjustment strengthens the connections within the neural circuits encoding complex movement. These procedural memories of learned motor skills can persist even when memories of events are disrupted by damage to the hippocampus. Next, thalamus. Thalamus is an egg-shaped structure in the middle of our brain. It is known as a relay station for all incoming motor or the movement and sensory information such as hearing, taste, sight, and touch but not smell from our body to our brain. Thalamus is located in the middle of our brain. It relays information about most of our senses out to the rest of the brain. And it is generally considered as the grand central station for sorting of sensory information before it connects onto the cortex. Vision, hearing, touch, proprioception, and taste signals are all routed through the thalamus before they are sent to the respective processing centers in the cerebral cortex. However, the thalamus is not just a messenger for our eyes and ears. It also receives feedback input from our cerebral cortex, which helps it filter sensory information in real time before forwarding it all along. The thalamus is further connected to other brain regions like hippocampus and the brain system, and may also be important for coordinating signals between various lobes of the cerebral cortex that controls attention. Next, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a small area in the center of the brain. It helps produce hormones that regulate heart rate, body temperature, hunger, and sleep-wake cycle. Hypothalamus also provides a link between the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the endocrine system, which is the glands and the release of glands that releases hormones. The hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, which releases hormones that regulate various bodily functions. Signals from the hypothalamus keep the body temperature in check, regulate thirst and hunger, oversee the tick-tocking of our circadian rhythms, and promote bonding between family members, particularly mothers and their children. The hypothalamus also helps to bridge subconscious signals from the brainstem with signals from the cerebral cortex. Next, amygdala. It regulates emotions such as fear and aggression. The amygdala is also involved in trying emotional meaning to our memories, rewarding processing, and decision making. Our amygdala is a small almond-shaped part of the brain that works within your hippocampus to create a long-term memories of specific and often emotional events, which is called the episodic memory. It is particularly known for linking fear, aggression, and anxiety to knowledge of people or places. Damage to the amygdala reduces aggression, but it also makes it difficult for people to avoid painful or threatening situations. The amygdala creates these associations by changing the strengths of connections between neurons, a processing or a process known as long-term potentiation. By hardwiring memories of emotional events, the amygdala ensures threats can be recognized and avoided in the future. Next, hippocampus. It is involved in long-term memory formation. It also plays a vital role in spatial memory, allowing individuals to keep track of where objects are and the positions of their body relative to the objects around them. Hippocampus. Hippocampus is a Greek word for seahorse. It is responsible for long-term memory of your wedding day. Part of the limbic system, it communicates with the rest of the brain via entorhinal cortex. The hippocampus produces new neurons even in adults, while the rest of the brain stops growing early in childhood. As newborn neurons mature in the hippocampus, they link up with the neurons throughout the brain to form associations between different aspects of memory. These memories are refined via changes to the strength of connections between neurons or the long-term potential, similar to what occurs in the amygdala. The hippocampus also creates a mental maps of places, which makes it easy to navigate in a complex environment, and this is known as spatial memory. Next, corpus callosum. It allows communication between two hemispheres of the brain. It is responsible for transmitting neural messages between both right and left hemispheres. It is also involved in control, movement control, cognitive functions, and vision. Also, it is a thick, wide bundle of neural connections linking to the left and right hemispheres of the cerebral cortex. Neurons in either hemisphere stretch their axons or the neural wires throughout the corpus callosum to communicate with neurons in the opposite hemisphere. Specialized cells called glia-wrapped fatty deposits known as myelin around these axons to provide insulation for electrical signals, akin to the rubber insulation found in the electrical wires. The corpus callosum contains so much fatty myelin that it is white in appearance, making it known as the white matter. Gray matter, which contains the cell bodies of the neurons, is where computations are made in the brain, and the white matter is the superhighway of all the information, and the corpus callosum is the biggest superhighway in the brain. Next, so these are the lobes of our brain: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. So we're going to discuss the definitions or functions of each lobes. First one, the frontal lobe. The frontal lobes are located directed behind our forehead. The frontal lobes are the largest lobes in the human brain. It is also responsible for control over many abilities, including how we think, how we move, and how we remember things. Also, the frontal lobe is the largest lobe of the cerebral cortex. It is responsible for many behavioral traits that we consider uniquely human, including personality, decision-making, and motor control. The frontal lobe makes sense of information about the environment, memories, and emotions. And it uses this information about to make decisions. To accomplish this, the frontal lobe maintains connections to nearly every other part of the brain, filtering vast amounts of information to ensure we focus only on relevant information. Without it, we wouldn't have much of an attention span. The frontal lobe also provides us with working memory, which keeps relevant information available for a short period of time in order to make complex decisions. Next, parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is um, located underneath our crown of our skull and at the top of the rear of our head. It functions as a vital for sensory perception and integration, including the management of taste, hearing, sight, touch, and smell. Also, our parietal lobe integrates information from our senses to focus our attention in important things in the environment. It interprets our sense of touch and monitors the relative positions of the body and its limbs. The parietal lobe also receives signals from the occipital lobe that reflect the location of objects in our visual field, which it reconciles with touch and body proposition to paint a realistic picture of surroundings. Next is occipital lobe. Our occipital lobe is a part of our brain located at the back of our head. It focuses in processing visual signals sent from our eyes. Next, temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is located behind our ears and are the second largest lobe. It functions as associated with processing the auditory information and with the encoding of memory. Now, for the next part, the neurophysiology of learning. So when we say neurophysiology of learning, it means that the neurophysiology of learning involves mainly the cognitive processes, of which the most important is the information of our physiology learning system. Next, information and processing system. So this system includes sensory registers of our short-term memories or the STM, working memories or the WM, and the long-term memory, which is the LTM. Most sensory input is discarded since at any given time, we are bombarded with multiple sensory inputs. Next, memory networks. With repeated representations or with repeated presentations of stimuli or information, neural networks can become strengthened such that neural responses occur quickly. From a cognitive neuroscience perspective, learning involves forming and strengthening neural connections and networks, which is the synaptic end connections. This definition is quite similar to the definition in current information process learning theories. Next, Ebb's or Hebb's theory. The process by which means that these synaptic connections and networks are formed has been the study of scientific investigations for many years. Hebb in the 1949 formulated a neurophysiology theory of learning that highlights the role of two cortical structures, which is the cell assemblies and the phase sequences. A cell assembly is a structure that includes cell in the cortex and subcortical centers. Basically, a cell assembly is neural counterpart of simple association and is formed through frequently repeated stimulations. Next, neural connections. Despite Hebb's ideas being over 60 years old, they are remarkably consistent with contemporary views on how learning occurs and memories are formed. As we will see in the next section of development, we are born with a large number of neural or synaptic connections. Our experiences then work in this system. Connections are selected or ignored, strengthened or lost. Further, connections can be added and developed through new experiences. Language learning. It is the interaction of multiple brain structures and synaptic connections. It is seen clearly in language learning, especially when reading. Although modern technologies allow researchers to investigate real-time brain functioning as individuals acquire and use language skills, much brain research on language acquisition and use has been conducted on persons who have suffered brain injury and experienced some degree of language loss. Such research is informative of what functions are affected by injury to particular brain areas. But this research does not address language acquisition and use in children's developing brains. Up next is the brain development. So, the first point here is the influential factors. Although human brains are structurally similar, there are differences among individuals. 5 influences on brain development are genetics, environmental stimulation, nutrition, steroids, and teratogens. Next, phases of development. During prenatal development, the brain grows in size and structure, as well as in number of neurons, glial cells, and neural connections or synapses. Prenatal brain development is rapid because it occurs in 9 months and most cells are produced between 4 months or 7. Cells travels upon the neural tube, migrate to various parts of the brain, and form connections. It is estimated that at its peak, the embryo generates 250,000 brain cells in a minute. Wow, that's a lot. Next, critical period. Many books in child rearing stress that the first 2 years of life represent a critical period, such as that if certain experiences do not occur, the child's development will suffer permanently. There is some truth to this statement, although the claim is overstated. 5 aspects of the brain development for which there seem to be critical periods are language, emotions, sensory motor and development, auditory development, and vision. Next, motivation and emotions. So this is our another subtopic. What do we mean when we say motivation? Contemporary theories depict motivation largely in cognitive terms. Most motivational processes have cognitive components. Self-efficacy, for example, refers to the perceived capabilities to learn or perform behaviors at designated levels. Self-efficacy is a cognitive belief. Next, rewards. Cognitive and constructivist theories of motivation postulate that it is the expectation of reward rather than the reward itself that motivates behavior. Rewards can sustain motivation when they are given contingent on competent performance or progress in learning. The motivation may decline over time when people view the rewards as controlling their behavior. For example, they are performing tasks so that they can earn a reward. Next, motivational states. From a cognitive neuroscience perspective, motivational states are complex neural connections that includes emotions, cognitions, and behaviors. State change with conditions. If it has been several hours since we have eaten, then we likely are in hunger state. We may be in a worried state if problems are pressing on us. If things are going well, we may be happy. We will be in a happy state. Similarly, a motivational state may include emotions, cognitions, and behavioral geared up towards learning. Like other states, the motivational state is an integrated combination of mind, body, and behavior that ultimately links with the web-like network of synaptic connections. Next, emotions. One theory that is consistent with the preceding view of motivation is a network theory by Hallgren and Marinkovic in the 1995. In this view, emotional reactions consist of 4 overlapping stages. The first one is the orienting complex, second one is the emotional event integration, third one, response selection, and the last one, sustained emotional context. The orienting complex is an automatic response in which individuals direct their attention toward a stimulus or event and mobilize resources to deal with it. Next, instructional applications. The relevance of brain research. There has been a surge of interest in the last several years in the neurophysiological research exploring brain development and functioning. Many educators view brain research with interest because they believe that it might suggest ways to make educational materials and instruction compatible with how children process information and learn. Next is the educational issues. Brain research and CNS research in general raises many issues relevant to education. With respect to the developmental changes, one issue involves the critical role of early education. The fact that children's brains are super dense, it implies that more neurons are not necessarily better. There likely is an optimal state of functioning in which brains have the right number of neurons and synapses, neither too many nor too few. Next is brain-based educational practices. Specific educational practices that facilitate learning and that are substantiated by brain research. Briones in the year 2001 contended that brain research is relevant to psychology and education to the extent that it helps psychologists and educators to develop a clear understanding of learning, development, and motivation. That is the relevance when it helps to substantiate existing predictions of learning theories. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching.